Crazy enough, I've been trying to get John on for a while now. Like every couple of months I reach out and I'm like, hey, John, come on the podcast. We'll get together, have a few laughs. All right. Welcome back to Gathered by the Ghostlight. I'm Jonathan Cook, your host, producer, and sometimes voice actor on this thing.
And I'm Devon McSherry, the Hannah to his Jimmy fucking Leeds.
And that will make sense in just a minute.
You'll get
because
it, I promise.
We have an amazing guest today. Playwright and screenwriter John Pollono will be joining us, and we are going to dive into his writing journey from his stage productions to his theatrical releases.
Which includes Riff Raff, which hits theaters February 28th, and it's got a stellar cast. You gotta go see it.
Yeah, hell yeah, it does. And if you haven't seen the trailer for that yet, go check it out. But first, here is our interview with John Pollono.
Pollono?
Pollono? Wait, Pollono or Pollono?
Let's find out.
Is it Pollono or Polano? I've heard it pronounced two different ways.
It's Pollono is the correct Italian pronunciation,
Nice.
but
Awesome. Well, that's what we'll go with.
I grew up in the Northeast. It was Polano, so I answer to both.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll say John Pollono, writer, director, actor, written plays, written movies. Your new movie, Riff Raff, releases on February 28th. I've seen the trailer. It has such a stellar cast. You got Bill Murray, Ed Harris, Jennifer Coolidge, Pete Davidson, Gabrielle Union. So many great actors in this film. Combine that with your masterful storytelling and your dialogue that you write, and I think we have a pretty great movie that people are going to be able to see next week.
Excited to see it, for sure.
You'll like it, Jonathan.
Yes.
All right, before we get into that, can we have you, just in a nutshell, tell us how your theater and writing and film career began? What brought you to writing?
Let's see. So I always wanted to make movies, and I moved out after, digging ditches and hitchhiking across the country and wasting time. I moved out in my sort of mid-20s to LA and had a bunch of really shitty screenplays. Can I swear on this? I'm sorry.
No, you totally can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good.
I wrote a bunch of shitty screenplays that were very sort of derivative of other movies. And I was working in the mailroom at Castle Rock Entertainment, and I had a good buddy who I still know to this day. This was like in 2000. My buddy Phil Santani, another Italian. Yeah, he was taking an acting class. So I went and took this class under the pretense of like, if it'll help you be a writer, which I do agree with. If you want to be a writer, learn how to act, whether you want to be an actor or not, just to sort of get that. And you go to this acting conservatory and, work your way up. I was like the stage manager because I could barely afford it. And then eventually you get up to these sort of master classes, and then you study theater, you study plays. They don't give you like Pulp Fiction or, Grey's Anatomy to do those scenes. It's not that. You're studying these like things. And I didn't, where I grew up, I didn't really have much exposure to theater. And I started reading these plays and doing these plays in class, and it was just electric, the best, these classics that any fool who studied it would have known, but I didn't. And it really kind of rewired me. And then I started writing, monologues in class, and then I started writing scenes for other students in one-act plays, and then I really just sort of developed my voice, and we started a theater company. My wife, who I met in the class, she and I started dating. We were pals forever, and we started this theater company, and then we got pregnant really quick and got married really quick, and then we're still married. It's awesome. But we had this baby. And it was kind of like, wow, I have to really, shit or get off the pot. For me, it was like daydreaming about it and sort of being distracted, and quite frankly, being single in LA and spending so much time like just trying to date and, live that life, which I had never had before. It was very consuming. So then it really gave me this focus. So I started writing plays, and you get an immediate reaction when you write theater. It's up. The audience tells you, I believe this, and it was certainly the case with me, is that the audience tells you more about your voice as a writer than anything else. If I write a script, in best case scenario, they're shooting it in a year, and then a year later you're doing a test screening, you're finally getting that reaction. With theater, it's very instant.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And you just get a sense of what works and what doesn't, especially if you have a certain audience. So yeah, I cut my teeth that way. I started writing play after play, and with not really, mostly focused on the work and just creating art. And I did that for a while, and I had a couple of pretty successful plays. Then I started signing with better agents, and they were using, this was around, 2012-ish, where they were using my plays as a writing sample. At that time, it was kind of a new thing. I had written some scripts, including Riff Raff, which I wrote a long time ago, which is an adaptation of a play. Okay. But they were like, "Look, man, everybody sends out a screenplay. Let's have them read your plays." And that really kicked the door open, because it was a much more unfiltered version of my voice, the voice I had sort of developed in theater. And now, then it became, the playwrights especially became very much a thing in the subsequent years, where mostly for staffing TV, because theater, inevitably, you're good at character and dialogue and things like that. But I got in the film world, and then, my first big thing was this movie Stronger, which took place right near where I grew up. And the producers and stuff had just read my plays, and they're like, "Wow, he has the voice of this." And it was a book that, when you read it, you couldn't really see the movie. I mean, I wasn't getting offered much, so I really marinated on it and over-serviced it in a way that, 5 years later, I probably would have passed on that book, because I'm like, where's the fucking movie? But I really spent time with it, and I really spent time with the family, and I put the type of work that you kind of need to, but dedicated myself to it, and that that really took off, and then that led to some other things, and I still kept writing plays for a while, at least. And but then you kind of, I think the key to writing is your voice is the most important thing. And the theater really showcased my specific voice. So it's like, hey, if you like this voice, hire me. But and I've been hired subsequently for a couple of things that are not necessarily in my so-called wheelhouse, which I had fun with, but it's build it and they will come. So that's where I've sort of carved out something. That's sort of how that happened. And then theater has been very, very good to me. It's where I met my wife, my close friends. I got, some of the biggest things I was ever cast on in TV and film were as a result of me being on a stage and people seeing it. And in those cases were stuff that I had written, and it was just sort of that thing. I guess I didn't know any better. I've known a lot of people who have tried to replicate a similar thing, and to varying degrees of success. And it just sort of happened to me, not necessarily by accident, but I literally was just like, I don't know what's going to happen from this. I'm just going to express myself. And kind of like what you guys do when you put up a play out there or whatever, you're doing it. You're not expecting, Chris Nolan's not going to be in the audience, but you just do it because you love it, And I believe that if you do stuff like that, then, things will gravitate towards you.
Yeah, you mentioned the theater you started. We're talking about the Jabberwocky that eventually became Rogue Machine Theater.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Are you still involved with Rogue Machine Theater?
Yeah, I am. I mean, there was definitely a heyday where my wife and I and our daughter lived in the theater and built it. And things change. Kids get older. We get another kid, and my wife just did a play there. But I I'm on the board. Go to support everything. Certainly, if I have a play, then that would be the first place I would go. But definitely not as involved as I used to be, just because I'm sort of in my earning years now. And the niche that, the itch that got scratched by doing a play, which is an incredible amount of time and energy you put in, and there's not really any money. I've sort of transitioned that itch into making my own films and directing more. But I mean, theater hasn't gone away, and I love it, and it's still, nothing beats it. I'm very excited to go back. I'm just being pulled in different directions.
Yep, you gotta do what you can when you can, but
that's right.
Makes sense to go for the money while it's there.
Hey.
You just gotta ride where the momentum is.
So my first experience with a John Pollono play was our local theater, Le Chat Noir. They were doing your play a decade ago, A Small Engine Repair. And I remember I read the script and I was like, this is a pretty cool little. This is a little different. I like it. And then when I went to see it, and Le Chat Noir always gets the best actors, and they did such a great job adapting that from the page to the stage. And I was thrilled to see it. It was a great piece of work. And then their next season, we know the owner pretty well, and he'll reach out and be like, "You guys got any suggestions?" And I was like, "Well, let me see if this Pollono guy has anything else that we can look at." And I found Lost Girls, and I mentioned it to the owner of the Chat, and he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "I actually read that one when we picked Small Engine Repair. It's actually in our consideration pile. It's just there's a lot of plays we're gonna, but they did end up picking it, and I just remember reading Lost Girls, and
I didn't know they did Lost Girls. That's great.
Yeah. I think it was the season. It was either a season right after Small Engine Repair, or was it 2 seasons later?
It was like
but
2018 or 2019.
Yeah, but so we ended up doing that, and I remember reading that script when I first found it, and I don't want to spoil anything, but the twist in there, the moment that you get and you discover that it's the 2 different timelines, that was just like. That was such a wow moment for me. It made me want to go back and reread things because I was just like, I remember them saying that. Wait, that makes so much. Okay. Oh man, it pieced together so well. And it was just like this master class on how to make a proper twist in a story without, making it too predictable. Cause I did not predict that. I thought something was coming, but not that. And it gave it such a rereading value as well as a rewatching value because she actually she stage managed that play.
One.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And
we loved it.
It was so good to see multiple times, especially after reading it. And I knew it was coming, and just to listen to the audience and be like, what are they gonna? And you hear the little
awesome.
little gasps. And then moving forward, like the next year, I think it was during Lost Girls that I had that I initially reached out to you, and I was like, "Hey, I love your work. We're doing your plays." And it wasn't much, which was like, "Oh, thanks," one of those things. And then I think it was the next year, I was looking for another Pollono play, and I came across Rules of Seconds, which I was looking for published plays, and I think all I found was Small Engine Repair and Lost Girls, and I was like, well, let me see what else is out there. And I found these articles about this play you wrote called Rules of Seconds, and I saw production photos. Like, what is this? What is this play? And I remember I reached out to you, and I was like, so is it okay if I read it? And you sent me this PDF file, and it's based in the 1800s in Boston when dueling was still a thing, and I had never read anything like that. The flow of it was actually very kind of cinematic because the scenes are kind of quick. But that was it. And I gave that to Chris. He had never read it, the owner of the Chat. And I was like, what do you think about this one? We should do this one. And then, he was totally gung-ho about that because he loves your work too. And then we didn't have to go through a publisher. We just did everything through you, and you let us produce that play. We were so grateful. We were both actually acted in that play.
Did you really? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, she played Hannah, and I was James Leeds, the brother.
Yeah, no, I remember you guys doing it. I remember seeing the shots, and it looked so cool. And that's such a big play. I mean, I love that play, and it was. We did it in LA. You guys did it. Had a great production in Pittsburgh, and it was supposed to go up in New York, and then COVID hit, and it kind of threw that off. But
we finished our production like 2 weeks before COVID hit.
Oh, really?
February 2020 was our closing night, and then the next month was COVID. And I was just like, man, I'm so glad we did that in time. But
well, I spent the last about year and a half gearing up to turn that into a film, and we're sort of, knock on wood, our plan is to do it this year. We're sort of putting the pieces together. We're shooting in Ireland. We did location scout. We found all this stuff, and the adaptation. I mean, I always loved that, and I always felt, to your point, like once I opened it up cinematically, it's still very contained. It works really well as a movie. It's very very like lush. It's going to be a very departure from certainly Small Engine Repair and these other sort of kitchen sink gritty things. It's going to be, I'm really excited about it. We're starting to, just amass the cast and getting all those pieces together. So it should be really cool.
I'm definitely going to follow that.
I'm so excited.
You did I remember seeing on your social media, you did a reading of, was it the film version last year?
It was the screenplay.
Version, yeah. So you did like a test reading just to see how audience would take to it. So how did that go?
It was. I have these producers, this student entertainment, who, interestingly, when we did the play in L.A., it was this big equity house in downtown, Latino theater company. It was this huge. Joe Bonney came out and directed. It was beautiful. And afterwards, I met with these guys, and they were like, "Hey, would you ever turn this into a movie?" And I was like, I don't know, maybe. And then I kind of put it away. And then when I wrote it during the strike to direct, they were the first people I shared it with, and they're on board now. And they've produced they kind of, their little niches. I mean, they do a lot of stuff, but they're really good at like adapting plays into movies. They did One Out of Miami and Blind Spotting and
Oh, nice.
Anomaly. And they're like killer partners. So that sort of took it to a whole other level. But having made a movie and kind of, chomp at the bit to do it again, it's much different the second time. And this is a much more ambitious thing. But, and like the themes of the play are, I think, more relevant than ever. And they're all like not sort of, I've never really interested in movies and plays that lead with the theme. You know what I mean? I feel like that one is very sort of subtextual and really comes across, but interestingly enough, it still has such relevancy. I felt like it was a way to sort of say something in that context, which that's why it kind of always stuck with me. And
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad you guys did it.
Yeah.
I would say, what are we? We were 1 out of 5 productions or 5 cities that saw that. Is that how many productions it now have?
Pretty much. It's only been done at smaller theaters, and again, it was supposed to have a bigger production in New York with Joe Bonnie, and it just kind of fell apart. And then things shifted, and the economy of theater changed, and what they do, and I feel like theater's not going anywhere. But that type of play sort of didn't really click with a lot of stuff at the time, and now I think, I mean, who knows? But I was like, I just want to make it as a movie and get a broader audience with that.
Yeah. I will say our town is grateful. Every performance of that sold out when we did it, and I think it had a lot to do with the fact that they had already experienced Small Engine Repair, then Lost Girls, and then we're doing another Pollono play, and everyone kind of knew your style.
That's awesome, man.
So everyone in town came out and supported that. It was such a hit. Even when I run into fellow cast members years later, it's like we always bring up stories. Remember that time? Remember the boot bit? It's just so much.
Well, it's so fun, and to me, I think a lot of my sort of writing style came from writing plays for my theater company and for my friends and family and all that stuff, where you're like, if you're going to show up and put this costume on, I make sure you have some meat, you know what I mean? Something to do. So Rules of Seconds, the play, was very much formed out of that. It's a big ensemble, but everybody has their moments. And I mean, that's how I like to tell, especially theater, it's always weird to me when I see a play and then like some character gets on stage for the last 3 pages. You're kind of like, you're asking a lot from that person.
Yeah.
To go there, 4 to 6 nights a week and not have that. But that play, everyone who's done that always has such a great experience because it is so theatrical and so everybody gets meaty, fun parts. I mean, Hannah's like one of my favorite characters ever.
Yeah. Honestly, I got so many compliments for that role just because you root for her. She is so strong and like the most level-headed of all of them. And so I really enjoyed playing that role. It was a lot of fun.
How was it doing the accent? How was it?
Yeah, I had fun with that too. That was actually the first time I'd done an Irish accent. But
really?
I was like on YouTube looking up, okay, how do you do this?
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, my goal was to have the accent but still be understood, which can be tricky when you're just
it's a
learning.
tricky thing.
But
We're actually looking to shoot the movie in Ireland.
so cool.
First of all, Ireland kind of is trapped in time. It really looks like Boston in the mid 1800s. There's obviously great incentives to shoot something over there, but it has because I looked into doing it, in Massachusetts, in upstate New York and stuff like that. And we deforested so much, and these trees have grown back, but it's a different vibe. But you go to Ireland and it has that. And it's interesting because, growing up near Boston, you go to Ireland and it's so similar. Because so many of the Irish came over to the area where I grew up and colonized, created a life there. And so much of their culture came over with it. It's really amazing. If you guys have never been, you should go. You'd love it.
I've been to Ireland. Yeah.
You have?
Yeah. We wanted to go. My husband and I wanted to go before we had a child. So we made it happen. We're like, let's go to Ireland. And then a year later, I had a baby. So it was fine. It all worked out.
Yeah. There you go. An Irish baby, an Irish kid. There you go.
But yeah, Ireland was beautiful. We loved it.
Speaking of adapting plays into films, you did this with Small Engine Repair. You just mentioned doing it with Rules of Seconds, and we're just learning you also did that with Riff Raff, your new movie.
It makes sense for me at least because I when I'm writing a play, it's something I'm not doing it for the money, and I'm doing it because I'm very interested in it and engaged with it. So then when I'm sitting there specking something out, it's something that lights a fire in me, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so Riff Raff was a play called Razorback. It was the first season of Rogue Machine. And I mean, truthfully, it's more of a movie than a play. I mean, it was kind of a movie on stage, which I wanted to do. I thought it was cool to do like a, dark comedy kind of, all those movies we loved in the 90s where they were like talky, funny, with explosions of violence and all that stuff. I was like, well, let me try to do this on stage and just to have the actors just chewing the scenery and doing it. But at the same time, harness the power of theater to make like a dysfunctional family, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf type thing, but then throw in this crime element. And I mean, that was pretty early for me. Like it was only, I think, the second full-length play I'd ever written. And I didn't really know that, I've seen many, many plays since then, obviously consumed my life. But at the time I was a little naive and being like, oh, this would be really cool. It's like a movie on stage, and audiences really loved it. Some of the critics did not. That's sort of like in the arc of me, like stopping to read critics and stuff like that. I mean, I feel like I very much write for an audience, you know what I mean? And I write for an audience that, like me, is maybe not incredibly well versed in theater and wants to have, I mean, even like you're talking about that twist in Lost Girls, that was all me being like, wow, when you get a people in an audience of a theater, you can really show them how visceral and exciting a play can be. As opposed to some plays, which I kind of tune out a little bit, where they're just kind of like preaching to the choir, so to speak. And I wanted to not do that. And Razorback, as it was called then, was like, let me push the envelope and really create characters that are incredibly unfiltered and inappropriate. And theater was more like that back then. And this is like 2008, I think. Theater to me was always like, I would see shit and I was like, oh my God, this is so fucking inappropriate and crazy. And talk about it and made you like uncomfortable in a beautiful way. And that's what attracted me to theater, because I'm like, these things aren't being told elsewhere. So then, interestingly, I wrote that script, I don't know, 2015 or something. And when I was originally wrote it to direct it, I thought it was like a contained movie. It was like, if you're going to do an independent movie, make it contained. And passed that around, and people really liked it, but they were like, no one's making movies like this. This is like, feels like it's a remnant from the 90s. And I was like, all right. And then it just kind of floated around and had little stops and starts. I actually, when I was directing it way back in the day, I had a meeting with Ray Liotta. He wanted to play the lead, and I met with him, and we just couldn't get the pieces together. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing. And then ditto, we shared a management company, and he read the script and he's like, I want to do it. And I mean, really the truth is, with these small movies, not that Riff Raff is that small, but you need to have somebody who is pushing that boulder up the hill every day.
Yeah.
Collaboration helps.
Yeah.
Everything.
Well, and ditto is like, was his superpower was like, he locked into it and he just fought for it. For I don't know, like 4 or 5 years, maybe 4 years to get it made. And but it was like, now that it's coming out, it's sort of it's new and it's old fashioned, so to speak. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a story you've always known, but it's gonna be new to the crowds. Yeah.
Well, and I think I mean, I've written. Look, that was again one of the first screenplays I wrote, and it breaks a lot of rules that I was kind of too naive to not realize are the rules. I like multi-protagonist plays. I like multi-protagonist movies, but that's a lot harder to do and not done as often. It's difficult to stick that landing of it. Typically when you're doing a smaller movie, you're like sticking with one character's point of view, and like you'll get that like big name to do that one. And then everything's sort of built around this. This was sort of different. And it made it a little more of a challenge for casting. I mean, Ditto has got a great reputation and you get this killer cast, but it's sometimes harder because there's no clear main character. I mean, Ed Harris's character is sort of the one that everyone orbits around, but everybody, Jen Coolidge's character of Ruth, which is why I wrote the play, was for that character initially. But, they kind of float in and out. And sometimes you get actors of a certain caliber and they're like, look, I'm not in every fucking scene. I'm not going to do it,
Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah.
Which is just the nature. If I'm going to do a small movie, I want to be like in it So that took him a little while to kind of get it, and then we got the cast you're meant to have. But and it does you'll see it. You'll if you love theater, you'll love it, because it is contained and it's talky and they're complicated characters, and it's a very much as the play was. It's very much there's some very distinct archetypes and tropes within the story that I was like intentionally did, and then wanted to subvert that and sort of tell it in a nonlinear way and mess around in that way. Again, just being naive, being like, why not? Let's just do this. It's fun. And look, I was able to see that movie with some audiences, and it's made for an audience and they love it. I don't know. We'll see how it does, but it's fucking funny, and it's unexpected in a way that I feel has been missing for a while, where you just have characters and you're like, you don't know what they're going to say or do. Like, I always love that element of surprise in telling a story. And, I just get bored when it's people just doing what you expect, you know what I mean? And you can be obnoxious, and there is a part of me sometimes I have to curb, where I'm like, get a little bit too subversive or a little too, provocative. Yeah. You know what I mean? Which is very easy to do, especially I think over the last, 4 to 6 years, theater became a place where people were really looking to be outraged and looking to be offended, which I'm like, that's why I go to theater. You know what I mean? So that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's weird. I mean, I blame social media for this sort of homogenization of things, and again, I never want to create anything that further marginalizes somebody or hurts any specific community. But at the same time, I'm like, look, it's coming from love. It's coming from a joy of storytelling. It's coming from a joy of either cinema or theater or all that stuff. That's all I can really control, But I think when you dilute something, look. Riff Raff is very unfiltered, and I think if you're along for the ride, you're going to have a lot of fun. And some of the stuff that was in the script, I'm really shocked it made it. You know what I mean? I thought a lot more was going to be sanded down, but Ditto did quite the opposite.
So, for the process of creating Riff Raff and going through the filming and everything, were you there like on set ready to make those changes, or they would just like tell you if they needed to make changes?
It was sort of a combination of both. I mean, Ditto and I had worked and collaborated and did various drafts over the years just before it got made. And then there was the writer's strike, so I couldn't touch her for a while, and then the strike went away. I did a lot. I was on like 2 really big deadlines, so I was on the set quite a bit. But Ditto was always there, like calling me at the end of the night, and I was rewriting pages and sending them. And like when we got Bill Murray, who was like a last minute addition, he and I did like, 7 hours of calls ahead of time, just going through his character and the script. I mean, the guy's a fucking genius. And really, really working with him in a way that, look, when you're on set, it depends how it is. But, Ditto was very, very, he loved the script. He didn't want to blow it up. And the script is also written in a very riffy way that feels improvised, and it isn't. And, Jen Coolidge sort of, you give a scene or lines and it goes through her sort of mechanism and then comes out. She still hit it. It just, there's an invention to that. But it was a great collaborative process with Ditto and with the actors, and changed some shit. But for the most part, we worked on the development of it for so long that by the time the shooting happened, it was kind of there. There were a couple moments where, I'm sitting here on this thing and Ditto will call me and he'll be like, hey, listen, I feel like we have some time. What do you want to, like, there's one really kind of unusual moment in the film where, Jennifer Coolidge is the ex-wife and she comes to this house, and Ed Harris has married Gabrielle Union, like upgraded. And he's got this stepson and this like, who's very intellectual, and it's sort of the life he wants. And Jen Coolidge, who's sort of the first wife who was discarded, basically. Look, my sister was going through a very nasty divorce at the time I wrote the play. And I was like, all of this complicated emotional shit I kind of put in there. And in a sort of unfiltered, unflinching way to say, like, this is a story of what happens to women when another family happens, what happens to the original son. So that's there, that's to me the theme, and that's why I wrote it. All of that pain and blood is subtextual within this framework of dark crime story. But like there was this one scene where Jed Coolidge's character talking to Ditto, and he's like, we need to have a moment with just Ruth doing something simple. We have, tomorrow we have like 2 hours to shoot it, and then spitballing, and I pitched him this scene over the phone, and he's like, holy fuck, I love that. And then I wrote it, and same thing happened with Stronger, actually. Like, to me, that's one of the best movies in the moments in the movie now, where she had time, and I was like, like my wife is like very much she's a beautiful woman, and she has all these like skin regimen, and I was like, what if, she goes in the bathroom and sees Gabrielle Union's beautiful, like high-end skin products and makeup and all this stuff, and she's looking at it, and it's like this cinematic moment where she's like, wow, this is what it would have been like, or this is like how the other half lives. And she's looking at it and trying the different makeup, and then she just starts stealing it and like putting it in her pockets. Small moment, and these are the things you discover, and it's in the movie, and it's very beautiful and weird, and I love it, and that's something that I don't necessarily would have been in the script unless you had that open dialogue between the director and the writer to kind of try these things. And I mean, look, I look at myself as a filmmaker and not just a writer. Not that this, writing is, I mean, the hardest part and the most important part, but you also, when you know how a film is made, you're not precious about things, and you're there to help, and you're there to, pick up the ball on the 3rd-yard line and get it over. So that was really cool. So that was great experience. And, some of those actors I knew and had a relationship and could talk and do all that stuff. And theater gives you the ability to learn how to write for actors, and especially, a first production, you're right. You lean into that actor, and you cater it to some extent. And film works in many, many ways. So once that cast started getting formed, it was like going in there and changing some things. And Gabrielle Union, who had some really, especially as like a Black woman, had some ideas. She's like, look, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. So chatting with her and being like, wow, that's amazing logic that, once you get an actor who's really into the character and bringing their life experience, you listen to that.
Oh, yeah. So Riff Raff, that actually premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival. What was the response of the audience there? And did you get to attend that one?
Yeah, I did. I was there. I was awesome. It was like I think it was like 1,200 people in the theater.
Wow.
And it was great. Yeah, it was an awesome experience. Definitely a highlight of my sort of creative life, seeing it sort of connect in that way. It was great. Again, this is a movie just like the play, but the movie is really made for an audience. And you can tell when you see something like that, like you're along for the ride. And if you're not, that's fine. Like, I have no problem. Like, if you create something and it's like not your cup of tea, that's totally fine. What pisses me off sometimes is when people are like, I didn't like that, let me ruin the experience for people who did.
Yeah.
Which is, again, the beauty of social media sometimes doing, which everyone's obviously entitled to their own opinion, but like, man, it's like, if my daughters listen to a song and she absolutely loves it, who am I to be like, no, Taylor Swift sucks? It's like, no, hear it through their thing, or like, let people enjoy shit that they like. So this is very much, if this is in your wheelhouse, you're gonna fucking love it, I think. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to be defensive. I don't know, but I think it's just fun, ballsy, unfiltered, and it needs to be seen with an audience.
I mean, it looks good. The trailer, I mean, there's a lot of funny one-liners in there, and it looks like a really kick-ass story. Adapting the stage plays to, what's the biggest challenge in adapting a stage play to film? Like for Small Engine Repair, that's a 3-person play. For the film, you included the wives, you included the daughter. What was it like, and what was the main challenge of bringing that to the screen, or any play to screen, really? I
mean, look, I think, it's a very simple concept, but it's like opening it up. And to me, it's having done it enough, it's always like, look at what works in the play, like Small Engine Repair, for example, like what works. And what works on stage that isn't going to work on screen, and vice versa. And to me, that was really like, how do I make it more emotional, more intense, more real, more grounded, which was the approach, as opposed to going more sort of broad and comedic. I mean, I think the play is probably funnier than the movie because the movie, a lot of the humor is thrown away and the stakes feel real. Cinematic stakes of life and death and Small Engine Repair, the tension is very, very real. So I leaned into that more. And it was more like all these important characters who are talked about in the play, how much more emotional will it be to see it? And how much more will it really inform the sort of central concept that I had behind it, which was this sort of like gray area situation that happens and how it colors your idea of justice and misogyny or whatever it is. And people, that's a very divisive, the play wasn't as divisive because I think theater audiences are looking, especially at that time, for a very complicated experience. But with the film, it is like, it's a litmus test. And I was like, well, knowing where that's going, how do I color it? And it was really very much of showing the women, because to me, the play was always about women, even though there's no women in the play. But having those women in it and having especially Crystal be someone that you really care about as an audience and really see her as flesh and blood, so that when you get to the final bits of the movie, you're like hopefully emotionally invested in her, and it makes that sort of litmus test that much more complicated. So that was sort of the left brain portion of it. But then it just became, how do I just make it as grounded and real as possible? How do I make the relationships feel real? And how knowing that you have to shoot it and how it's going to do. And that was challenging, making 65% of a movie in one location. And it was very simple things like stuff that a play is a master scene, but like you could have done that movie, you could have just shot the play and locked down a camera and done it like Rope and done it, and then but that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And then moving it around, finding that shop, like letting the locations be like, when you cast an actor and you let the actor inform what the characters will be, letting the locations do it, and just having that real grounded quality of it was sort of what it was. But in terms of Riff Raff, it was kind of unleashing the characters in a way that they were contained on the stage in a way that maybe made the play not as effective as it could have been as a movie. And again, just making the stakes bigger. And like in the play, the bad guys played by Bill Murray and Pete, those characters don't show up till the second act. So the first act of the movie is much more of a conventional, like, dysfunctional family thing with a little bit of elements of dangers as you're really just laying the chess pieces out and the conflicts between all the family. You go dark on intermission and you come up, and the whole last 20 minutes is like they're being held hostage by the bad guys that you've heard about but you haven't seen. So in a movie, it's just keeping those guys alive. Do you know what I mean? And showing them and sort of laying the groundwork for that. Gotcha. And that's just sort of a problem to be solved and to figure it out. And then, both those, I mean, Small Engine Repair and Riff Raff both had a lot of characters telling stories on stage. I mean, I love that. I come from a history of people who like to tell stories and engage you in it. And that's a great tool of theater, is like, you can like tell a fucking story. I love it when characters tell stories in plays, especially. You know what I mean? Instead of just monologuing about their feelings, like, oh my God, I gotta tell you what happened. Because if you can really make the storytelling reflect a lot about the plot, the character, the theme, and what's going on with them. But and then if you have that and stuff that you think really works and was really thought over, then you just visualize that. It's a very sort of easy, obvious thing to do. Yeah. And then as it opened up, you find other scenes that need to do it, and it's still very contained and it's very much about the family dynamic. But by seeing some of these moments, and in particular, there's a gas station scene where it's in the fucking trailer. I wish they'd spoil anything, but they go there and they're riffing and they're doing it, but then you see Bill Murray's character come on and blow the guy away. And in the movie, it's shocking and gory, and there's brains on the thing because you're supposed to be like set the tone of, look, this is funny, but like these are real bullets. And that's something you can do cinematically. And so you open it up and you do more of that stuff. And then like a lot of all the characters in the stage play and then the movie, they all have that moment where they tell a story about themselves that is reflective of the theme and the plot. And we just kicked it over to these, similar to Small Engine Repair, where all the main guys have their story, and then you see it in the movie, and that's just something you can do in movies. Why
flashbacks?
I mean, flashbacks can be like really not done well. I mean, I think, look, first of all, if you're engaging and entertaining an audience, they're going to like it. And that's the Riff Raff stories are very interesting because they're all, it's not Rashomon-esque, but it's like they're all telling the point of views of things and really colors who they are. Especially there's one where the Marina character played by Emanuela, this amazing Italian actress, they're like, how did you meet? And she tells this kind of beautiful story, and then goes to Rocco, played by Lewis Pullman, and he's like, well, how did you guys meet? And he tells his story, and it starts out ridiculous and violent and crazy, and then it ends in beauty. And they're told in different orders, but to me, I was just like, well, this is telling you all you need to know about them and how they came together, as opposed to doing it in a very linear way.
What modern day filmmakers inspire you, and also what filmmakers did you grow up with that inspired you to get into this field?
Yeah, I mean, listen, my filmmakers still that I feel obviously Tarantino is a no-brainer, and I love,
of course,
Gore,
because I think his movies are so. And look, that first of all, his movies came out at a time when I was like, in high school, and this is cool, and this is why I want to get into movies. And for what Tarantino did to me was seeing his movies in a theater. I was like, it's kind of like theater, right? You're having this communal experience and you're living it with everybody. And it was at the right time and it was the right material and it was right everything. We're all in it. And when it's scary on screen, it made us all connected. And when we laugh and cathartic, like that really shaped me a lot. Like Pulp Fiction, some of those moments where I was like, oh my God, must be what it was like to see Psycho when it came out and did that. And, I still obviously love him. And then Scorsese, being Italian and Catholic and seeing how he weaves in all of this real depth and real theme. He's always been obviously someone I'm really, really admire. And quite frankly, Spielberg, I mean, his movies shaped me so much, and how he zigs and zags and is like this master storyteller who tells, character and feels all that. But I mean, lately, like there's just some killer filmmakers out there. I got to say, seeing Greta Gerwig's Little Women really inspired me to turn Rules of Seconds into a movie where I was like, I mean, she's remarkable, but I just loved how she created a period piece that's very lived in and feels very relevant and feels like of the moment and beautifully done. And I was like, oh my God, she's just an absolute beast. And Robert Eggers, who's from New Hampshire, actually, like I am. I love his movies. Just the passion he has and the unique quality he brings to all of them. And Martin McDonough is like a huge hero. He's a theater playwright who turned into movies. And really, like I think sometimes you gravitate towards artists that speak your language, And I think Martin McDonough has so consistently done that to me with like In Bruges and Banshees of Inisherin, where it's like, it's heartbreaking and it's deep, but it's also really fucking funny and sometimes really scary. And I love that sort of bullseye, It's very hard to do, but theater, we do it all the time. So I love doing that in film, Anora is a recent example of something I felt really did that, where you are tense, but it's also very funny. And it also shines the light on something very complicated and human.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up McDonough, because that's another one of the owner of the local theater we work with. He's done all McDonough's plays too.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Well, man, it's like I think the collective IQ of an audience goes up, obviously, in theater and in the movies too. And I think his stuff is challenging. And you're not. It's not. I'm not interested in stories that are like sort of patting you on the back and then like giving you warm mac and cheese. It's like it should be some other things. And look, I'm like you. Like I like to create shit, and I like to. My favorite art is stuff that you want to see again, and decipher all that stuff. And like, for example, when I first saw Reservoir Dogs, the first time I saw that, and I was pretty young, but it terrified me. I had nightmares about it. And then I saw it again with like friends, and I was like, oh my God, this is fucking hilarious. and because once you know what's coming, you enjoy it in a different way. And I just like stuff that you can watch in multiple ways. I mean. Small Engine Repair is really, really funny, but like I hope if you see the movie, just like the play, and then you rewatch it, you're getting a different experience. So it's putting something out there that really respects an audience and asks you to listen and not, if you're offended by something, to not just shut off and then be like, okay, it's there for a reason. I mean, to me, you can get irresponsible sometimes in art if you create something that is intentionally offensive without a sort of deeper statement you're saying on it, or like, what are you really saying here? Or like, I'm not pulling punches, but I'm doing this for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And in humor, look, I think the masters you're talking about, like a Martin McDonough, he creates tension and heartbreak, and then you'll have a laugh, and it just blows it all out.
Yeah.
But then what does it do? That opens you up to take even more heartache,
Yeah.
and more tension. And you know, if you love a character, you don't want him to get a paper cut. Never mind. Anything. Which is why, like, you know, I think a lot of play adaptations to movies sometimes don't work because the stakes are not cinematic. And a play that could be remarkable and riveting on stage because you're breathing the air of the performers and you're in it has trouble translating to cinema because it's not an inherent life or death struggle, or the stakes are not there. And I think that the things I've adapted, at least, have cinematic stakes. So they do have an easy, like, especially Rules of Seconds to me, it was always like, Jesus, this is perfect cinema. There's a structure that's marching you towards a very horrific conclusion that it permeates everything, the humor, the everything. It's just a ratcheting of tension until you have this like really far out cataclysmic thing, which Riff Raff is similar in Small Engine Repair too. So I think that and Martin McDonough and these guys, they all kind of have that quality to it, which I like. That's not to say I you know, I've written plays and done other stuff that are much more lower stakes, but more for the stage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. What other modern day playwrights inspire you nowadays? I know you said Martin McDonough, but who else out there do you catch in theater?
I mean, look, I see everything our theater company does, and some of the stuff, like this guy Will Arbery wrote a play. They got a play running right now. He wrote a play called Heroes of the Fourth Turning a couple of years ago, which I just thought was fantastic, and to me felt like a real return to form of theater that I was always drawn to, which is very challenging and doesn't just reflect your own belief system back at you. So you feel like, oh, I'm so smart. It was like, wow, we should talk about this. And I really loved and appreciated that play. You know, my daughter is a musical theater prodigy, so I have watched a lot more musical theater over the past. That's what she's studying in school, and
she actually teaches musical theater.
I do.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah,
for kids.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing better. My 10-year-old does it too, and it's just such a beautiful thing.
It's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I really have gotten a deeper appreciation for musical theater, which and now we're having sort of a boon of musical movies and stuff like that because but I think they share a similar thing where it's like a good musical the song will express itself musically in a way that the text can't. You know what I mean? And in some ways I think in the plays that I wrote, the humor or the tension would do the similar thing where it's like you're suddenly in a visceral moment. You're sort of transported a little bit. It's a similar kind of dynamic.
So next up for you is Small Engine Repair, the musical. Is that what we're saying?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I could ever write a musical, but I mean, maybe someday. I mean, look, again, theater's not going anywhere. I love theater. To me, I'm like in this track, but I could, you know, my daughter's always like, hey, you should write a musical. I'll put me in it and we do this. And I mean, this is like nothing I'd like to do more than that. So. Yeah. But I appreciate musicals. I don't necessarily. I mean, I can't write a fucking music, but maybe I'll find somebody who could do it when we collaborate.
I actually did a show with both of my parents when I just got out of high school, and we all did a musical together, and it is definitely a very cherished experience of mine. So I'm sure she's sincere. She would love to do something with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sophie's done tons of stuff. I mean, she had a little role in Small Engine Repair. She's a killer actress, as is my wife. They were both in the movie. And they were both in the reading I did. And you know, my daughter is like, I mean, she doesn't really even need help. She's like kicking ass. But I look, man, I think to me, the best thing about creating art is when you can work with people you love and you trust. And, you know, I think that that's great. I think that when you look at the long span of artists, whether they're playwrights or directors or artistic directors or whatever, it's like they work with the same people again for a reason. It's like when you find someone that clicks with you and you trust. And I mean, look, for me as a director, it's like I really want to trust. Like I'm not like I don't want to go in there and like beat people into submission. I really love and respect acting and what they can bring to that. And you steer them along, but like, hey, it's yours now. How do I help you do that? That's how I like to work. That's what theater taught me. And yeah, there's nothing better than working with people that you're excited to see them sink their teeth into something. I mean, that's very inspiring when you're writing something, or anything. You're like, you can't wait to get their take on it. I mean, an actor will, no matter how you have sort of a omniscient view of the story or the play or the movie, and a great actor, someone like people I love working with, like a John Bernthal and Shea Wiggum, who are just geniuses. Like they go down the mine shaft of that character deeper than you ever would. They start noticing things that. It's not that you failed. It's just that you didn't notice that. And they're like, hey, you know what? If they're great and they bring that truth to it. I mean, like Shay, there were a lot of times in shooting the movie, he's like, I'll do whatever you want. But, he's so in that character. He's like, here's what I'm noticing. For me to go from here to here to here, he's like, I'm bumping against it. So we either like break it apart and figure out a way to do it, or you're like, you're right. This is not essential. And that is the fucking beauty of collaboration, man.
Yeah. I will say for me personally, just when I first discovered your work a decade ago to now, you've been an inspiration for me as a writer, as even a filmmaker. Just seeing your journey, through all your plays, through all the creative stuff you've done. So thank you, and I love that you're so accessible. You never anytime
I'm here anytime, and I know you're like really into the horror space too, right?
I do what I can. I've made a few short horror films, and
No, I love that. I love horror, and I think that that's such a cool like community. I mean, the guys I know who are one of the nicest guys I know is this guy Jacob Chase, and he's as sweet as can be. He's like a dad. He's a young dude, and he makes all these crazy horror movies, and it's just such a cool thing. I mean, there are some horrific shit. Like he made a short film that I was like, this is fucking horrifying. He's such a good dude. I just love that community. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think it's really cool. But I think that is a similar thing to what we're talking about. You want to give an audience an experience, right? And that could be horror. And that experience is that like that feeling in your gut, like I'm fucking afraid, or I'm laughing, or I'm crying, or I'm emotional. It's just like bring an audience something. To me, and that's always what I've required. And again, if it's a play that makes me think or makes me do something, but when stuff is just done to show how smart you are or whatever, and that loses me, and that's just not what I'm necessarily interested in. So I have big respect for people who are like, I want to scare the shit out of you. You know what I mean? Like, I want to give you something, as opposed to just I want you to be depressed or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the best stories are in the gray. Like you don't have black and white. Everything is gray because that's what life is. So yeah. I think that's how we provoke the thought, is that muddy up the right and wrong, like you do in Small Engine Repair.
Well, life is complex, and characters, you're only seeing them for a window, and they need to make some difficult decisions. And I mean, every time your character opens his or her mouth, they're making a choice, and you should make that choice impactful. I think. And again, if they're gonna, like, Hannah's a perfect example. I mean, she's got a heart of gold, but she's tough and self-destructive and all these other things, and it's sort of anchored to her religion and her ethnicity and all these other things, and she's just struggling. So she's butting against that all the time, for better or for worse. So I'm like, that's a fun character, as opposed to a character who just says and does the right things all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, especially what's funny is Hannah and the Martha characters in the movie really became so much of the story in the play is them, and then they're kind of holding the water until sort of the end. And in the movie, that was a really great prism to look at the adaptation, is following those characters as all the men are shackled to this, idea of dueling and this idea of being a man, where they're under it, and it's really fun. When you create a character that you really love as a writer, there's a lot of them telling you how to write the story, which is awesome.
Yeah. So as far along as you are in Rules of Seconds with getting, you said you're working on casting, locations, like when can we expect that when it happens?
I mean, you'll be the first to know.
Awesome. Come back on when you.
No, for sure, man. The independents space is it's about getting those few pieces that can justify the budget. There's a much bigger budget than small engine repair. It's much more ambitious, and we have some great talent attached in an awesome way. And it's just getting the final pieces, and then you start the scheduling and see, hey, you want to do it? Great. When are you available? And you know, a big ensemble like that, you got to kind of make it work.
Yeah.
But these things kind of like when you're making a movie, and it's similar to making a play is like you have to like listen to the work, and they will like get out of the way to some extent. Like it's going to happen when it's going to happen.
Right.
You have to fight for it. But ultimately, it's like the cast of Riff Raff, for example. Ditto had people come and go for years, and then the cast you're meant to have is there. The people who show up, it's like they're meant to be there. And you just got to kind of steer it along. So that's sort of where we're at. It's like putting the team together that's meant to be there. Okay. But we're getting real close. So yeah, I hope to have more soon.
Yeah. So Riff Raff opens February 28th nationwide. Distributed by Lionsgate Films. Everyone listening, go out and
it's
check
roadside
out
attractions. Yeah, man. All I would say is like this is the same corny plea that every filmmaker makes. Is like go see it in the theater, because it's like we need to keep cinema alive. And you know,
heck yeah.
I have nothing against streaming. This is a movie that I think will work really well if you're kicking it in your living room and watching it with some friends. But like you see it in the theater. Like let's support this art and make sure it continues. You know, I think this is a movie that could really connect with an audience, but I mean, there's not going to be anything like seeing it in the theater.
Yeah.
And let me know what you think after you see it.
I totally will. I'll reach out to you the same day. I'm gonna see it on opening night.
We're gonna.
Oh, awesome.
But yeah, I mean, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem, man. Keep me posted. I'm always glad to jump on the Zoom with you guys.
I guess stay in touch. I hope we can collaborate again in the future. We definitely want to have you back on. We do Rules of Seconds. Riff Raff, February 28th. Everyone go see that. Thank you so much, John.
All right, guys. Have a great day.
All right, now it's time for the credits. Go ahead and roll the dice.
Okay, here we go.
Wait a second. I got an idea. How about we do our Rules of Seconds characters? Yeah. In honor of John Pollono. All right, here we go. Yeah. Right, this has been a Gather by the Ghostlight production, produced by Jonathan Cook
and Devon McSherry, and we'd love to thank John Pollono for joining us today to talk about his new film.
That's right, hell yeah, his new movie, Riff Raff, it comes out on February 28th. Go check it out.
Yes, and we'd like to thank JK47 for the title music, as always, and additional music by Josh Tarp.
This program is funded in part by the South Carolina Arts Commission, which received funding from the National Endowment for the Arts.
And as always, everyone stay safe out there, and we'll see you the next time we gather round the ghost light.
By the ghost light.
She doesn't care. No, okay, I'll do it again.
I may just keep that.
Round the ghost light. It felt like the Irish thing to do.
'Cause there's a ghost in the radio that keeps it on repeat. There's a demon in a bottle trying to drag me to my knees, and I can't afford to fall apart every time we meet. Oh, there's a ghost after me.
I mean, it literally just played the whole thing like a minute ago.